Hey there, I'm Alex, and today I wanted to spend a few minutes going over upscaling in Nuke and I guess all the options you have inside and out of it, and maybe compare a few and see where we land. So what I have here is just a selection of images um, that I did different types of upscales on. Just the baseline. I wanted a bit of variety in terms of contrast and subjects, hard surface, or just nature and stuff. So let me just dive right into it. And I won't, go ahead and compare every single image with every single upscale method, just because it doesn't really make much sense. There's not a lot of terribly exciting stuff to look at here. So let me just make a little room here, just make our images a bit bigger. And I have them all lined up here, and I just wanted to also compare against the plate, of course, just so that we can see what's going on. And I guess the basic one, right? The just out of the box quickly, I need to bump something up by a factor of 2 or a specific resolution is of course just the reformat node. So in the reformat node, we have options like the filter, right? And by default, it's always set to cubic. So I've gone ahead and done that, right? So if we compare our plate to our reformat. It's not, I wouldn't really call it an upscale, but if we just reformat it to 4K, it just looks a bit softer, but it has more pixels, right? If we look here, we're going from an HD plate to a 4K plate, but there's not really anything terribly exciting going on. So that's just baseline, right? No, very little effort, but you do get the new resolution you're after. So if you want to keep it low effort and uh, and you want to stick to a reformat node, I would recommend you just use the sync 4 filter, or alternatively, you can use the Langsauce. It kind of depends on your plate, right? So I'm not even going to look over the other images for this specific reformat because there's really not much going on. And I guess same for this, right? So if we compare the output from reformat set to sync 4, right, and we compare it to our cubic one, you can see it is sharper, right? Like it does give you some more detail. However, what you can see, and maybe if we go to a different image, let's say this one with the car here, if we go to this image here, you can see that sharpness coming through, right? Like it's clearly sharper than the other one. If we compare our Sync 4 output to our HD plate, you can see things are getting nicer, right? Nothing too crazy, but it is nicer, it is sharper. However, if we look here, right, and we compare even our plate or our just reformat set to cubic, and we compare it to the Sync 4 one, you see how we start introducing some really dark lines here. And if I sample one of these, you'll see we're going into the negatives, right? So how do we solve this? Because we are producing a nicer, sharper image than with the cubic filter, but we don't really want our image to change in terms of color, right? So if we go to another one here, let's say this one. So if I compare this to the plate, you see all of our windows are getting slightly darker on those high contrast areas. It gets pretty nasty pretty quick. So how do you deal with that? There's a simple solution. You don't really need to change anything at the reformat level, but you do need to change the color space of your image before. So if we look at our image here, right? At a raw image, all you need to do is you need to add a log to lin node and set it from linear to log. And then once you're in log space, you can just do the exact same reformat we had before. And let's just go back to the car. It's pretty easy to see with those lines. And then once the reformat is done, then you can just go back and just switch this from lin to log to lin. And then if we compare these two outputs, right, if we compare this one and this one, what you'll see is that those nasty black lines are gone, right? So if we compare now our new Sync 4 in log space output compared to the plate, it's sharper, it's nicer, and we're not introducing those nasty, dark areas. So this is definitely the way to go. It's nice, quick, and it produces a better result than just keeping it at default. And now within when you're already inside log space, you can just always add a sharpen node here, right? So you can just sharpen it by 1, 2, or 3 points depending on your plate. That's something you have to. There's no magic number. You just have to gauge. But as a baseline, this is pretty decent and much nicer than just the default reformat, right? Set to cubic. So I guess moving on, right? Moving up, I guess. A pretty popular option is, of course, TVIscale, right? TVIscale basically grabs your input and multiplies it by 2 in terms of pixel count, right? So we go in with an HD plate and we come out with a 4K plate. It does, again, pretty decent job of sharpening. Let me just see if we can find something nicer here. Okay, so here on these lines, you can see things are getting better, the car itself. So TVIscale is, I guess, by now, most of us have used it, but it is more expensive to run than just a reformat, but it's nothing too crazy either. So I guess TVIscale, it is what it is. It's pretty okay, and it's just something for you to know that exists and an option, right? So kicking it up a notch, we have the Upscale node. So the Upscale node, oops, we just look at the pre-render, just so we don't get stuck caching here. So the Upscale node is actually a machine learning node, as far as I understand, that's been pre-trained on, well, upscaling. So if you look at the output here, oh, looks like I paused my viewer. It does, I guess, as good of a job, I guess a better job than TVIscale for sure. Nothing too crazy, but if you do have access to it, I would say this should be your new default. Most cases, I'm surprised by what it can do. So if I go here, you can play it enough. You see it's trying to predict things, so it can break things like very intricate patterns. It's interpreting this mesh as lines at a certain point, right? So it's just making straight lines. So you do have to keep that in mind, right? These nodes, so I guess from here onwards, because they are trained, they are predicting things, right? So while yes, you can get nicer results, there will be issues. So you have to look closely. There can potentially be issues. However, I have yet to have an issue with the Upscale node or any of the previous ones in terms of it being temporally stable, right? So far I've used it many times, not a problem then, and you see it does a pretty good job. Like it's just go to a different image here. So if we compare here plate to upscale, it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. You don't really have to set anything, right? Just make sure. I guess optimize for speed and memory is always a good idea. I guess regardless of what video card you have. So just know upscale is pretty good, and you should be using it if you have access to it. That doesn't mean that you can't just sharpen it then a bit. So you can treat it after the fact, but as an entry point, this is pretty good. So next up is a bit more advanced, or not really advanced, but expensive, complex, which is the Cattery nodes. So if you go here under the Cattery menu and you check the upscaling, you have two options. You have the TecoGan and you have the RealESRGan. Right, so let me just get rid of that expression there. Right. So the TecoGan is cheaper to run than the second option, which I'll cover in a second. And both of these upscalers behave differently depending on the plate, right? So you always have to test. These are not nodes, so but both of these, not that, but this, these nodes are something that you don't want to keep live in your script because they are incredibly resource expensive, and I tend to just chuck them in, add a GUI expression to them, and then make sure I just pre-render what I'm running and then see what it looks like, because there's not a lot of options in there for you to tweak, right? So just pre-comp them, see if they play nice with your plate, then awesome, good. That's good news. So I always tend to test both of them. They can be a bit hit and miss. So if we look at this here, right, it looks like the TecoGan is doing a pretty decent job. I'd say comparable to Upscale. So if we compare these two, there's really not a lot of difference there, right? If we look here, sharp areas. So it is nicer, right? You can see here in the pixels of the ear, it is nicer, but it's not something that's incredibly different. So TecoGan, not exactly a known quantity because it behaves differently for every plate, but worth taking a look. Let me see if I have another example here for the car. So see if you compare the car to the plate again. Okay, certain areas are nicer than others, but yeah, hit and miss, right? I guess that's kind of the deal with Cattery and these upscalers. So next up, we have the RealESRGan, and this one is the one that's so expensive to run, and sometimes I really don't like the outputs too much. It tends to be too creative for my taste. So if we look at the upscale, yes, these lines look nicer than the plate, but it's just a bit of a mess. Like it's breaking the pattern, and you can see here in the logo, like comparing the plate to the upscale, that's just not good, right? So some areas are doing a really good job, like these metal, very reflective pieces. But then there's other areas, and it's just destroying your plate. So you have to be careful, and especially with the real ESRGan, ESRGan. If we usually it tends to over soften people. So you can see that's just not a good result. Like yes, it's sharper, but at what cost? It just looks like a wax doll. So yeah, not for everything, but maybe for hard surfaces that don't have too many intricate patterns, it does a good job. Like if we look at what it's doing here with the suit, that looks nice. Although, it doesn't really have a lot of texture. So just keep it in mind. Again, it's just something that you can just chug on the farm, render it, and see what your results are. You could be surprised, or you can just say, nope, doesn't work for me this time. And yeah, I guess that's kind of the last option for Nuke, right? So I tend to, stick with the upscale node, and I always try these, but most times I end up not using them. So it's a mixture of upscaling and then switching to log space and sharpening your footage a bit, and that kind of gets you a pretty decent result with very little effort. So that's kind of an option, right? Always remember when you do upscaling, do denoise your plates for sure, because you don't want to be upscaling grain. You want to be denoising, upscaling, and then regraining, and that's going to produce much nicer results. So I wanted to take it a step further and see other options that I've used in the past. Well, one option that I used in the past and I still use, I find it's really good, which is the Topaz Video AI, right? And if we look at here, the Topaz Video AI, it produces really good results, like really good results compared to most of the Nuke results. So I'd say if you have access to this should be your go-to. It's very reliable, temporally stable, and it has a bunch of different models that you can pick from without having 1,000 knobs, and you will get really good results most times. Like I can't remember once I said, oh yeah, it's not usable. You can usually tune it so that you get something really nice. So if we compare here, let's say, for example, we look at the car here, right? And we compare it to something like the Upscale. Like, see how the Upscale has a bit of the same problem where I should have done the Upscale in log space like I did here. It's introducing a bunch of dark lines, and it doesn't necessarily look nicer. Let me just go here to the train. So if we look again at the Upscale against the Video AI here, the Topaz, you see how the Upscale seems to be very noisy right? Like there's just a lot of artifacting, like compression artifacts that have been upscaled along. But when we look at the Topaz Video AI, it cleans that image really nicely. And again, you do have the option of selecting different models, and I just kind of went default with all of these. But you see how the upscale keeps all that digital noise and all that compression, it carries it through, whereas the Topaz one is just produces such nice and clean images. So you can see here what's going on. So you have to be careful. Again, check the models and maybe render a few versions with different ones, but you can get really nice results really quickly. And if I compare it now even to the plate, well, it's even more impressive, right? So Topaz to me is the clear winner if you have access to it. And if we compare here the plate, it does a pretty good job, right? So we have all that eye detail you can see here in the nostrils and here in the lips and the beard, right? So you can see this hair strand here. That's pretty good, right? If we compare to our original. So I wanted to take it to, I guess, the next level, which is my new obsession, ComfyUI. And with ComfyUI, you have to keep in mind that the results you get here using Super as an upscaler is you're introducing a lot of creativity to what you are to your output. Kind of, actually not kind of, exactly what maybe this one's doing, like the RealESRGan and the TecoGan, because they've all been trained on something and they're trying to predict what that would look like as a bigger image. It's not as rigid as something like TVIscale or the Reformats, where it's just math, putting these pixels in covering more space. So how do we do this properly? These are just predicting, like, what does this tie look like when it's upscaled? What does this cloth look like? The pores, the hair strands. So it is very impressive what you can get from something like Super and Comfy. It's very flexible, which is the nice part. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you here. So if I've gone ahead and I've taken the plate and I've reformatted it, keeping it to cubic, just so that we have a 4K image that we can wipe. And now I'm going to show you the ridiculous output from Comfy and Super. And you can see that's nowhere near close to the others. Like, this just takes it to a different level. And this is, again, it's not 8K or anything. I'm just upscaling that original HD to 4K. But you see here the amount of detail being introduced. Like, if we look at the eyebrows here, is unbelievable. And again, that's what I was saying about it's predicting. It's trying to guess, right, what's there. But if you rein it in, and if you're not too crazy with it, you can produce something that sticks to what should be, right? So if you look at the hair strands here, and we thought the one in Video AI was good, like, now this one looks really bad, right? If we compare it, it's so nice and sharp, and there's so much going on in this version. It even produces the really tiny hairs on the back of his neck, right? And if we look at the plate, like, it's just nothing. It's just guessing that should be there. It does look correct. This is not a simple thing where you throw an image at it and you get immediately the perfect image out. You might have to, dial some knobs, and this can be very, very overwhelming. I'm still very much in the middle of learning it. It's been just a little over a week, but I'm just blown away by this stuff. So looking at what other people have done in terms of copycat, right? And I guess I've covered copycat in my previous video. I can see grabbing this input from Comfy on a few frames and then training it through copycat, and I can see that working, theoretical, of course, because you can't just chuck the your HD plate into Comfy and it'll give you a video out like Topaz does, right? And that's the beauty of it. If we do that, this is going to be a mess, because every frame is going to do different guesses, and then those guesses won't work together in time. It'll just be jumping and moving all over the place. So this plate specifically is very slow moving. So the guy's just walking towards camera, maybe moving his head a bit. So I figured this would be a good one, and maybe I'll actually do that maybe, where I'll just render a few key angles of this guy and then train that through Copycat and be selective about it and see what my output can be in that sense. Because my alternative is this, right? Is Topaz Video AI, which so far produced the best upscale for this image, but you can't compare. Like if we look at the tie here, right? Like this is the Video AI, this is the plate, and this is Comfy. Like it's just nuts. You can see here it's got even those seams and everything. So if we look at Video AI, it just looks like a blurry mess now, even though it was the best one. So it still is the best, right, in motion. But in theory, if we can get this to train through Copycat for some shots, we can get something that's really impressive. So I guess that's my next adventure. I'll test, and if I find something worth sharing, I'll be sure to report back. But at least now. Just a bit of a recap now. Reformat is baseline, which everybody knows, everybody uses. But if you're going to do that, you probably want to do it just changing the filter to sync 4. And if you're going to do that, you should do it in log space and then just hop back to linear space after that. Then TVIscale is better than that option, although a bit more expensive resource-wise. And then the upscale, but again, you should be doing the upscale in log space like you did this, because you see I was introducing some dark areas to some of my images, so I guess that's something to keep in mind. And then the two Cattery nodes, hit and miss. Sometimes they're awesome, most times they're not, in my experience. And then if you do have access to Topaz, then that's no-brainer. It really is good. Much better than anything I can produce in Nuke for any of these images. So for all the images, Topaz just straight up won for me. And then the bit of a science experiment is Super and Comfy. And yeah, I'll report back when I find more. All right. So I guess that covers it for today. Cheers.